going to be talking about our sink or swim candidates for each NHL team. That is going to be in the Canadian division. Now, one thing to note about the Canadian division is that each of these teams are not just playoff hopefuls, but I think each one of these teams sees themselves in a normal division alignment.
Each?
Okay, not each. Sorry, Ottawa being a little bit of an after thought there. No disrespect for what they're doing. Think they're building really the right way, but 6 of the 7 Canadian teams.
Just real quick, you may notice the Canadians logo on my mug here. If Cam had a logo on his, it would be a Senators logo. So I just really quickly want to address that, no matter which team you're representing as a fan, we hope that this will be a podcast where you feel like it's represented well. It gets pretty tiring, I think, to, be listening to coverage of one form or another, and it feels like if, if it's not specifically tailored to your team, you feel like, maybe not always a fair representation. So we're going to give that our best go. If you feel like we haven't, feel free to let us know in the comments or whatever. But
yeah, this is going to be pretty intense, and so I think there's going to be some pretty fierce rivalries. I think there could be some disappointments in terms of playoffs, and I just really think that it's going to be fun to get into the sink or swim to see what can make the difference for each one of these teams coming up. So I'm going to throw this back to you. We're going to start in the West Coast, Vancouver. What do you got? Who do you think is going to be a sink or swim candidate?
I see them being a team. I'm going to intro the player this way. I see them being a team who a lot of people were talking about them before everything went down in the offseason with free agency and some trades that were happening and everything, as probably being the top Canadian team. People were sort of going back between them and Toronto, I think, before things shook out.
I was warming up to that, yeah.
And that definitely changed following free agency. I would say now, typically consensus where I'm seeing them ranked is like between second or third, all the way to like 5th. 6th even. I've seen them really, really dropping, and I see that as being a little silly due to I still have them probably in a range of 1 to 3 when it's all said and done, right up there, and the big reason is their pickup, who is my sink or swim player for them. I think that Nate Schmidt was one of the most important additions any team in the NHL has made in a long time. Like, I think that if you put Nate Schmidt on, like, is there another team in this division that doesn't desperately need Nate Schmidt? Like, what happens to Winnipeg? Because he can play both sides. He can play 21, 22 minutes a game. He is good in his own zone, the neutral zone, the offensive zone. He's so good and so versatile. He can play with anybody in your top 4. And what would that do to... We're going to talk about these teams later, but what would that do to Toronto? What would that do to Calgary, who some departures on defense, and Giordano is old. He can still play, but like, just, thinking... thinking down the road a little bit, right? Like, what would this guy have done on other teams? But he didn't land on any other team. He landed in Vancouver, and I think that depending on Hughes, hopefully there's no sophomore slump. They do happen sometimes. Hopefully that doesn't happen, but it is possible. But I think that if Hughes sort of performs as people would expect him to, if Nate Schmidt and him really mesh, and Schmidt performs sort of the way that people know he can, the way that Vegas fans know he can, I think that, I'm just quickly scanning through in my mind, I think that's probably the best defensive pairing in the Canadian division, and easily makes up for some of their other departures on defense. The stability would help, tenuous situation in goal. I think Holtby has some game left in him, but if he comes in and things are rocky, then that's a tough way, to get introduced to a team. So I think that if Schmidt plays, sort of, if there's a range of where you'd expect him to play, if he plays around the top, I think the Canucks are close to a lock for first in the Canadian division.
Wow.
And if he struggles a little bit, I doubt he regresses as a player, but sometimes it's just not a great fit or whatever. If that's the case, I could see them dropping a couple spots, but not too far. So that's why their range for me is 1-3, somewhere in there.
Do you know offhand, who Schmidt was paired with as a Knight most often?
I could be wrong, but it was typically, I believe, on the top pair with Shea Theodore.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure. I can actually look that up very quickly. If
right on.
Anything you want
Go
to say.
for that. Yeah, just because when you're saying that and that pairing between Quinn Hughes and Nate Schmidt, at least the potential of it, to me, I see Shea Theodore as, well, first of all, ultra talented. I think he's really come around and becoming more and more of a household name, getting some serious respect, which he deserves. And I'm not going to go so far to call Shea Theodore an offensive defenseman, but he certainly has a high offensive acumen. We saw some nasty dangles in the playoffs by this guy, and when he wants to take those opportunities that he sees, people have 100% success rate on a lot of their offensive chances and things like that. So a guy like Nate Schmidt, pairing with Theodore and being able to contribute on offensive and also be first back on defense would work exceptionally well, I believe, with because we see a similar thing in Colorado, right? With Makar, we see his partner is often the one who's more first back, right? Not saying that Makar can't play defense as well, right? But there's a chemistry, right, or a synergy that's there because you have to take care of both ends of the ice.
So it turns out I was quite wrong. He by far plays more, at least last year, with Braden McNabb.
Okay.
I think kind of being a bit of a... So I'm not super familiar with Braden McNabb, but I'm pretty sure he's one of those, his, I guess, archetype as a defenseman to be bigger body, not the most offensive-minded, not always looking down the ice. So I'm guessing Schmidt was playing in a bit more of a puck-moving role there, would be my estimation based on that. But I'm guessing also defensive usage a fair bit. And if I had to guess, I would say that Braden McNabb is a guy who, when he ended up in Vegas, probably exceeded some expectations.
Definitely.
And you have to think that playing with a guy like Nate Schmidt would contribute to that. So, that said, that's quite a different player than Hughes, but I do still I just can't help but to think that due to Schmidt's versatility, that he is going to have the potential of being a really nice fit there.
And Schmidt does have offensive upside, so when we're looking at him, if we look for something like expected goals for and against, I think you're going to find Schmidt and Hughes are both going to be pretty high in expected goals for, and keeping the puck in the other team's end is going to be a great way to lower the expected goals against. So I think that synergistically will work really well. Any other things about Vancouver that you wanted to mine? Or?
Well, I really considered Jake Virtanen. To me, I feel so I didn't pick him because I feel like they could finish first in the division without him really having a lot of success, just due to the depth in their top six. I think if Virtanen can be a 25-goal guy, hit the potential people know he can, I think that would be huge. But I don't think if Vancouver is finishing first or even second, I don't think it's going to be on the strength of their top six. Just, if you're looking at what's contributing the most, if you look at the top 6 forward groups around the Canadian division, it's not like a Jake Virtanen performing well is going to push them over the edge compared to a Toronto, Winnipeg, whoever, right? So for me, I think that he'll be big. Like, if they get Schmidt really hitting his stride and Virtanen, then that's, I think the only thing that could really derail that team then is the situation in net. But
yeah.
So they've got I feel a lot of little question marks, which is maybe why it's easy to say, have them slide down your rankings a little bit.
Yeah.
But I think if you have Schmidt sliding in and just being a solidifying presence, then the other ones aren't going to matter very much.
Nice. Yeah. Well, I think I analyzed Jake Virtanen as well, and they kind of got a lot of... Now, this is going to be a bit of a lightning rod for Vancouver fans. Really respect each one of you, and your fandom is really intense, and that's great. Jake Virtanen, as many of you would know, has shown some flashes of just incredible talent, but incredible inconsistency, sad to say. And so I think Vancouver got a lot I think they got where they were a lot last year without, I wouldn't say in spite, but certainly without Jake Virtanen. And so I don't feel like it would be really nice if he stepped up, but I take that yoke away from him of being a sink or swim candidate when I was looking at it. I think Holtby is kind of interesting, Holtby Demko. Now, I was kind of tempted to rush to the defense of Braden Holtby, right? He's a Stanley Cup champion. He's represented Team Canada. This is a really good goaltender. And I'm going to still say that in the present tense and not the past tense, that he was a really good goaltender. I think he still is a good goaltender, but when I was looking into some of his numbers last year, it was a little tough to look at. Now, these kind of years, they happen for goaltenders, and specifically his save percentage wasn't good, but I think people are really coming around to the idea that save percentage is also a bit representative of the team, right?
Yes.
And we could probably...
I will die on that. I completely agree.
Yeah. So I'm not going to bring the smoke there, but what I'm going to say is that, so we've seen key departures for Vancouver in three different areas, all three different areas. Goaltending, we saw Markstrom go after having a career year, and we saw Tanev go, now not necessarily on a career year, but right, he's been a really big part of the fabric of that defense there. And we also saw Tyler Toffoli, right, go all the way to the other end of Canada's, almost to the other coast. And so we've seen a lot of departures there, but we've seen a lot of sandbagging, and you know what, that's actually a bit disrespectful to guys like Schmidt and Holtby, who I think can do more than just plug the gaps there. I think they've addressed those, but perhaps what they're looking for up front is something internally. Now, again, maybe that could get you to think Jake Virtanen, right, could be a candidate for that. But we saw last year, and again, what I'm saying is that I feel like Vancouver didn't address their forward position, and so my sink and swim candidate's going to be up front. And it's going to be JT Miller, actually. Now, I like JT Miller a lot. I didn't like him as much as the start of the year as I did towards the end of the year. Like, this guy was just incredible. I thought it was a bit rich that a team like Vancouver, considering the position they were in at the end of last year's season, again, like if we try and lengthen our memory here, that was actually pretty high risk to give up a first. Now it worked out, and Vancouver's looking like a genius now. He was over a point per game player this year. It was an incredible amount. 77 points that he put up in like a shortened season. This is absolutely incredible. But that being said, I think JT Miller needs to continue to be an above point per game player, considering the loss of Tyler Toffoli that they have up front. I think he is going to have to buoy up some of the depth around him. I think he's going to stay towards the top of the lineup, but if he is in a second line role at some point or anything like that, I think that he really, really needs to make whoever's rounding out that top six better. And a lot of players can be really good, can be really productive without making their team better. I'd argue JT Miller did that this year, and I think he needs to bring that same level for Vancouver to have the same kind of or similar success that they did this past year. So I don't know, what are your thoughts on JT Miller?
Well, something that I think will bode well for him is a lot of hockey people are saying that they anticipate, if the Canadian division happens, especially if you end up in a situation where teams are playing, 2-game, 3-game series, you're going to end up with more playoff style hockey. And it's being said a lot, and so it's not like I'm thinking that it's a guarantee, but I think I would be surprised if that's not the case, where there's a lot more dump and chase, there's a lot more net front presence, size is going to be, I think, a lot more important, more on that later, but I think that playing with Elias Pettersson is a really good way for someone to find some consistency. So I think that'll be big for him and Virtanen. If Virtanen can, I'm just looking at the projected lines right now, and so the projected second line is Pearson, Horvat, Besser, which is sick. And so obviously that leaves Miller, Virtanen as the wingers in the top line. I had never thought to consider, maybe Miller's a bit of a regression candidate. But now that I'm thinking about it and that you mention it, you can't deny that it's a possibility. I would bring to mind a guy who just left the Habs, Max Domi, came in, had an incredible first year. That was very statistically obvious that probably regression was going to come. He had absurdly high shooting percentage compared to the rest of his career. He had really high number of secondary assists. He had a guy who was, I think, a very under-the-radar departure in terms of how much it hurt the Habs, in Andrew Shaw, because Andrew Shaw was glue for Domi and Drouin. Those two were both on pace for 70 plus point seasons. Drouin obviously didn't finish that way. When things hit the fan and that line got separated, Domi got to stay with Shaw, and they were a great fit. So the reason I mention that is because I think if I had to isolate who JT Miller's Andrew Shaw is, it's probably Elias Pettersson. If you remove him from this guy, he's not going to have success.
We don't want to sound like we're disrespecting Elias Pettersson here, but we're saying, players do complement, and I totally agree there shouldn't be issues, not to cut you off, but there shouldn't be issues if Pettersson's playing with JT Miller. But it would look it'd be a bit of a tough look if JT Miller was really struggling on that top line.
For sure.
And Pettersson was trying to fabricate it. JT Miller couldn't finish. So I think just because there was a lack of external replacements or significant ones in my view, that's what puts JT Miller a bit on a pedestal for me. So
that totally makes sense. I think the reason why I would say that I wouldn't worry about that very much if I was a Canucks fan would be the likelihood of playoff hockey happening. The likelihood that Tanner Pearson is never going to take Miller's spot on the top line. I don't know if there's a world where Pearson, Pettersson, Virtanen happens. You know what I mean? And I think Miller, this won't sound complimentary, but I'm saying I don't think this is going to happen. I don't think there's going to be a situation where he was just Pettersson's backboard. But if he was, he'd probably still have a decent season, you know?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like, Vancouver fans would know, watching Brian McCann have some success in Pittsburgh now, playing on Crosby's line temporarily, right? Like, if you put it with the right players, you can looked really good. You can look really good. But again, we're not saying that's who JT Miller is. He is benefiting from being part of Pettersson's line, but he isn't an anchor to Pettersson either.
Yeah,
right?
that was sort of me trying to say that I think the worst case for Miller still isn't that bad.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, and so, like, just to kind of wrap up this segment on Vancouver, what you're saying, there's a lot of little question marks. So if those are the players that we're picking for Vancouver, I think they're going to be all right.